Hey guys, it's Vince and Drew with Power 5 Fanatics, coming at you going into week 11 in college football.
Yep.
And we just, today is Wednesday, and we just had the college football playoff rankings that came out last night. So we're going to discuss that some. Then also we're going to, as we do that, we're also giving you our top 25. It's going to be different than the CFP.
Right.
In a lot of ways. Some of it's going to be the same, and the top 10 is pretty close, but we'll start off with, this actually kind of surprised me because we've had
Ohio State at number one for a while.
Yeah.
And they just kind of confirmed what we've been talking about.
Yeah.
I mean, they're the most complete team. It's pretty obvious. They got, and I think Chase Young's got a legitimate like Heisman type of conversation around him. I mean, he needs to continue to do what he's been doing because it's more of a quarterback award as of late. But he's a dynamic type of player, and they have that guy on defense.
Yeah, he's going to have some like huge games against Michigan
And Penn State coming up.
And Penn State.
But he has the games ahead
but
of
he
him.
has the games to do
that,
it exactly. Plus, he has the Big Ten championship, assuming that Ohio State's there, which they probably will be. So. He's got a lot of chances.
Which the West looks to be pretty good too in the Big Ten, where he might have another opportunity to prove
against
himself.
Wisconsin or Minnesota.
Yeah.
So he is going to have some chances, but I think he will have to have some like monster games for that to happen. But it is for the it's the most outstanding player, and so it's hard to argue that he hadn't been the most outstanding player in college football.
I think he has.
Like
Also
I said,
hasn't changed.
Hadn't changed for us, and I was a little bit surprised, to be honest with you, that I thought they'd have Alabama won or LSU won. So I was a little surprised with Ohio State, but then I was also, if you would have told me that Ohio State won, I'd probably say, okay, Alabama's probably 2, but they weren't. It was LSU, and obviously they got a chance to prove it this week if they are the number 2 team.
I thought it was interesting too because there was a lot of talk this week about, well, since LSU and Alabama play each other, the people thought that maybe the playoff committee was a little bit corrupt and would put them 1 and 2. Just for the sake of it, because there's still a lot of football left to be played, and that would definitely be good for college football to have number 1 versus number 2 team play. They didn't do that, and
I didn't really believe that would happen just because
I didn't either. But there was a lot of talk, in the media and some other places about that being an option because, I mean, look, they're both, however you want to put it, those are the top 3 teams right now.
Yeah.
So
speaking of the third one is Alabama, and I still really haven't heard much on Tua. I mean, I definitely think he's going to play. If I'm just going to bet on it, I would say he's going to play. But, the thing that he's got to be thinking about, and his family too, is, he's got potential number 1 pick in the draft coming up in the NFL. And, you wouldn't, obviously, this is a game. It's not the end-all, be-all. It almost is for Alabama. But they could probably lose it and still get in, maybe, Alabama. Maybe. They probably need some help. That being said, what I'm getting at is we're talking about tens of millions of dollars potentially, and you would hate to see somebody go out too early and then they get hurt. Yeah. I'm talking about a long term, but I'm sure they're discussing all that. But I think he will play.
The update I've heard is Ed Orgeron is like without a doubt believes that Tua is going to play, and they're preparing for him to play. And then from the Alabama side, Saban said that it's a day-to-day thing, and we're going to see how he does tomorrow,
of course he's
and the
say
next day,
that.
and how he progresses in practice, if he looks good, and then it's going to be a game-time decision. That's the update. And, of course,
that's always going to be
that's Saban's, like, default type of response to the media.
The head coach of a player like Tua is always going to say that.
If it's telling it all, Orgeron he doesn't think that he won't play.
Well, if Alabama was playing Ole Miss, he wouldn't be playing, but they're playing LSU, so he probably will be.
Yeah, I think so too.
4, now this is where things are a little bit different. We've had Clemson at 4. None of this
we had Oklahoma there, and I think we moved Clemson in front of them.
Yeah, after Oklahoma lost. So we had them at 4 last week, so this hadn't changed for us, but I was a little surprised, honestly, on the on the playoff rankings, they had Penn State there instead of Clemson.
We got Penn State at 5.
Right, and they had Clemson at 5. So, again, not that it really matters. I mean, this is just for us to talk about and for college football fans to discuss. But, I mean, Penn State's going to play Ohio State. Obviously, LSU and Alabama are playing. So all this is going to unfold anyway. So it really doesn't matter. So,
well, and it kind of starts for Penn State this week because they have to play Minnesota. And, you know, they're obviously probably going to be the favorite because I think it's in Happy Valley too. So they'll probably win that. But that's going to be a resume builder. If they can get that one, you know, I know the playoff committee's got them ranked at like 18. I'm talking about Minnesota. We got them ranked a little bit higher than that. But that could be a definite like resume builder, which could maybe vault them up a little bit if they can win that. So it will be interesting. But, you know, if you're a Clemson fan, I mean, I wouldn't, you know, worry about this. You know,
well, no, I mean,
there's
nothing to worry about because
Yeah.
you're going to have 2 of those teams that are going to be gone, and as long as you win, Clemson's in. Period. If they win,
Yeah.
If they went out, they're in. So, speaking of Penn State, of course, we got them at 5, and
kind of talked about them a little bit.
that hasn't changed much either, at least on our side. Where it did change a little bit for us, we moved Oregon to 6.
Yeah.
And I believe last week, Drew, we had them at, I think at
Well, somewhere around
9,
8 or 9.
yeah, 8 or 9. So we moved them up. They did have a very impressive win against USC. Like I would say, very impressive, 56-24.
They scored 28. It was what was the score? Like 10-0 in the first quarter, and then Oregon.
The other green team.
Oregon kind of blew up in the second quarter. They scored 28 points, kind of unanswered too. And then that's kind of when they opened it up, you know. And then from that point on, their offense looked good, their defense looked good, and they had a very impressive win, I thought, you know, against, you know, a team that we moved out of our top 25, but someone we've had quite a bit of respect for in USC all season. So
yeah. You know, USC, they had their shot. I mean, they kept hanging on there, hanging in. And, you know, this was their shot, you know, to make a statement, and they just couldn't hang with them. And Oregon, you just got to give them credit. They're just getting better and better.
Yeah.
They had a couple close calls with Washington. And the week after that, I can't remember, they barely beat somebody also.
Washington State.
State.
They barely beat Washington State and barely beat Washington the week before that.
But their defense got back in line because their defense had been playing good. Then they slipped up a little bit, but then they really handled USC pretty good. I mean, I'm 56-24. That's pretty impressive. That's the reason we had them in front of Georgia, who we have next.
The other thing is, I think
their loss.
The resume might be a little bit better, just in general.
Yeah, just from Georgia losing to South Carolina and Oregon losing to Auburn early in the year. But, of course, Georgia beat Florida 24-17. You know, everything's right out in front of Georgia. They just got to keep winning, and they're going to be in there.
Yeah.
I'm trying to – the playoff has them they had them at 6, Georgia, and then they had Oregon at 7. So it's flip-flop from what we had it.
Right.
Moving on to 8, we have Utah, which if you would have told me a month ago that the Pac-12 would have 2 top 10 teams on our top 25, I would have said you're crazy because I would think.
I think preseason we kind of all saw it, you know.
I don't even know if I saw that. I mean, Utah, you know, I knew they were going to be good. I just didn't think they were going to be as good as they were as they've been. I mean, they beat Washington 33-28.
Yeah,
did they play in Seattle? I'm pretty sure they played in
did.
Seattle.
And they struggled in this game, but Washington's kind of had Utah's number. I mean, they typically beat Utah, at least in the past couple years. And Utah was able to kind of come back in that game, you know. So that was, you know, and I had them on upset alert, you know.
Right.
And I had both these teams. I had Oregon on upset alert and Utah on upset alert. And both of them passed the test. And
the playoff
beat a pretty good team.
The playoff rankings also have Utah at 8, by the way. In 9, we have Oklahoma, which is also where the playoff rankings have them. And they were off last week after their debacle in Manhattan, Kansas.
Yeah.
So they had a week to lick their wounds and get ready for the remainder of the season. Can they move into the playoff spot? I would say they got a real good shot to do it. They're probably going to have some help.
Yeah,
I mean,
think
obviously
they
they got to win out, and that's going to be tough in itself. But if they do, I mean, they may have to have a little bit of help. Drew, I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think they will need to have some help. I mean, right now they're sitting at 9, and that's behind a couple Pac-12 teams who,
One
are
of those is
definitely the
gonna be
odds-on
gone.
favorite to win the Pac-12. I mean, one of those two teams is probably going to win the Pac-12. They're also behind, Clemson, who's going to probably end up taking one of those 3 spots. Ohio State, and then one of LSU and Alabama is going to take one of those too. There's
I would
really
say
only one spot.
they need Penn State to lose, and they do need some
I
help
think
because
they
they're going to
need
have either Oregon or Utah. Also, whoever wins that game, though, as long as they go undefeated, I'd say they're in the Pac-12. Oklahoma's going to have some help.
I also think Oklahoma needs to win impressingly. Like they
agree.
need to not just barely beat people.
Yeah, when they play Baylor, they're going to need to beat them by 2 or 3 touchdowns.
Yeah, if they
win.
can do that, I mean,
Yeah.
I think that's
They got a shot.
that would definitely vault the resume up for Oklahoma. So
Now we're getting into the teams that have less of a shot for sure. Florida will pretty much out of it because they got 2 losses, but we do think they're the 10th best team. The playoff rankings agree with us. They got them 10 also. Of course, I mean, they lost to Georgia. That's not a bad loss there, 24-17. Then we got Auburn. I call these teams the second-tier SEC teams. They're very good, and nobody would really want to play them, but they're, they have 2 losses, both of them.
yeah.
They beat Ole Miss, not real convincingly, but they did beat them 20-14.
Yeah, they see the weird thing about that is they actually dominated Ole Miss, like on offense and on defense.
So
but
the score
the
wasn't that
score
good.
was not
Yeah.
indicative of that game,
Right.
like at all. And in fact, Ole Miss had an opportunity to go out and beat them on the last drive of the game. So
Yeah.
it wasn't a very good performance by Auburn, but to say the least. I mean, they produced, but they didn't, do it effectively. They didn't score.
Well, college football, as it's being shown this year, like most years, it's kind of like the NFL. You got to have a quarterback that can make that big 3rd and 15 play late in the game, and that's really hurt Florida and Auburn a little bit. It's just their quarterback position's not as solid as these teams in front of them.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
I mean, if you look at the Heisman Trophy candidates, they're all in the top 10, or top 9, I would say. So, you got to have that guy can pull the trigger when you need him to pull the trigger. And sure, defenses win championships, but sometimes you got to just have some guy who can dig you out when you need to play.
Yeah.
At 12, we got Minnesota, which they do have a shot still. I mean, they just got to win and win and win.
Well, like I said,
and if they keep winning, they're going to be in the playoffs.
Yeah,
so.
I mean, they get an opportunity to play some good teams coming up. I mean, they play Penn State this week, and then they, got to win their side of the division. That's some pretty good teams: Iowa, Wisconsin.
This is the part of the.
And then they get a chance against the East in the, championship game too. So.
This is where ours is completely different than the college football playoff because we got Minnesota
higher than Baylor.
much higher. Well, they got them at 17, the playoff ranking.
Or 18. Yeah.
They got them at 17.
Oh, they do. Okay, yeah.
And we got them at 12, so I mean that's 5 spots. But the reason we got them at 12 is just what Drew says. Yes, we think they're better than Baylor, and they're better than these other teams that we're about to bring up. And the reasoning, first month of the season, I wouldn't have said that.
No.
But in the last 4 or 5 weeks, their defense has gotten a lot better.
They've exposed bad teams.
Yeah.
Like they're not just barely beating teams like in the past couple weeks. In the beginning they were.
Yeah, in the beginning they weren't very
starting
impressive.
to kind of peak here.
Yeah.
I think that their talent's starting to get more experienced, and I think PJ Fleck up there is really starting to this team's starting to buy into what he's trying to
He just
sell.
got a multi-year contract too.
Yeah, he just got a multi-year,
yesterday.
especially with that Florida State job opening up. I think they wanted to try to lock him in. But he's got this team believing that they can win the Big Ten, and part of the reason it's kind of controversial.
I don't believe they're going to win the Big Ten, but I do believe they're going to win the West.
Yeah, and no one wants to play them.
Yeah, no joke. Anyways, we're higher on them than a lot of the other sports writers.
I think the playoff has Baylor at 12.
Yeah,
we have Minnesota at 12.
At 13, we still don't have Baylor, but we got Michigan, and
it's kind of the same thing. I mean, they're exposing teams.
Well,
they
all of a
expose
sudden they got an offense, Michigan, and they're playing right now where they were wish they were playing in September and October.
Yeah.
And really, they're a team nobody wants to play right now. I mean, I look, I'm not saying they're going to beat Ohio State, but Ohio State fans are probably a little more or a little less anxious, or they're probably more anxious about the game coming up against Michigan because they've always had the defense all year. Well, all of a sudden now they're scoring. I mean, what they beat Maryland 38-7. I know it is Maryland.
And they beat Notre Dame the week before, like
Bad.
45-14 or something.
So, hey, they look for real. I mean, it's too late in the season for them, but they can still win the Big Ten. And so that's the kind of team I was saying, like Oklahoma needs. They need teams like Michigan to disrupt things, in a big way.
Yeah, they do.
Now at 14, this is where we finally got Baylor. And I'm just not as high on Baylor as some of the sports writers are. I've watched a lot of Big 12 football this year, and I'm not saying they're not good. Their offense concerns me a little bit. They run the ball really well, but their passing game struggles, and they just they barely win games. I mean, they beat Iowa State on a last-second kick. They get lucky and beat Tech. Okay, it was on after the fact. They're like, oh, we messed up. The refs did. They probably would have lost that game. They barely beat West Virginia last Thursday night, or was it Friday? I guess it was Thursday.
It was on Halloween.
Yeah, it was Thursday night. I mean, 17-14 in Waco against West Virginia. I mean, that alone, just that's a red flag with me. So that's one reason.
I think they were like an 18-point favorite in that game too.
Yeah. That's why we got them at 14 as opposed to 12, where the college football playoff rankings have them.
The thing is, they control their destiny.
Oh, yeah.
In the Big 12 too. So I mean, I don't. I mean, if they go 13-0, I mean, you can't. I think you're hard to keep them out of.
No,
the
they're
playoffs.
in.
They're still in the hunt.
I just don't think that's.
I just think if you're ranking it in week 10, I think there's some other teams that if you put them up on a field together, maybe they would. It'd be a great game.
Well, they got it. They got everything in front of them to prove us wrong for sure. 15 Notre Dame. They've been a strange team this year. Sometimes they look great. Sometimes they don't look too great. And they barely won against Virginia Tech, but Virginia Tech's been playing better lately. But they won 21-20. It is what it is for them. They just need to try to win out and get a New Year's Day bowl, which they would at that point.
Yeah.
16, we got Wisconsin, who was off, and another kind of puzzling team. Up, down, sideways. Defense is great. Offense, you never can tell what you're going to get. It's like Forrest Gump offense. It's like a box of chocolates.
Yeah.
And they got a tough road ahead. They're going to have to play Minnesota.
Yeah.
I mean, they're going to have a hard time winning the West just because their offense has been so shaky.
Well, they're already behind Minnesota in the West, so
right.
Yeah, they need some other stuff to happen.
Yeah, they need some help also. Mm-hmm. Next, we got another Big Ten defensive juggernaut, Iowa.
Yeah.
They were off also. But I tell you, man, that team, the defense is the Big Ten. It usually is, and this year's no exception. I mean, Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State, there's 5 solid defenses right there, and then you can start kind of including Minnesota in there too a little bit.
Yeah. After
That's
the past couple performances they've had,
yeah. And Indiana, that's another one. Their defense is good. So I mean, you got like half the Big Ten with like rock solid defenses. They are offensively challenged, some of these teams, and Iowa's one of those. They win games like 20 to 10 or 14 to 0, but they won a whole lot more than they've lost, and we got them at 17. At 18, we got Kansas State, a very big surprise this year. Let's face it, nobody in their right mind would have thought Kansas State, we'd be talking about them in the top 20 after week 10, but I mean, what can you say? They got a playmaker.
Playoff committee's got them at 16?
Yeah, they got them really high. They got them at 16. That was an eyebrow raiser. I don't think they're quite that good, but they got a playmaker at quarterback, and their defense is, what you would think a Kansas State defense is, one of the better ones in the Big 12 every year, and this year also.
Yeah, I mean, Chris Kleiman with Kansas State's got a strong argument to be like, maybe coach of the year.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I mean, the job he's doing there. I mean, I saw some stuff.
That's probably one of the bigger surprises this year is Kansas State.
I mean, Baylor is definitely in the Big 12 is one of them. Minnesota's one of them.
I'd say Kansas State
but
could
Kansas
be a bigger
State,
surprise.
I mean, yeah, who knows? I mean, they just got off of having Snyder, who's a Hall of Famer, and they had to bring a guy in to fill those shoes. And play in a stadium named after Coach Snyder.
Yeah.
It's just big. It's a big. It was a big job, really, for Kleiman to come in here. And
if you would ask me at the beginning of the season after 8 games, would they be 6-2 or 2-6? I'd say there's a greater chance they'd be 2-6.
Yeah.
So they've surprised me.
Yeah, and they really just outcoached Oklahoma too. I mean, I think it was just outcoaching. So
Wake Forest. They finally had the game they've been waiting on, for the Wake Forest fans, to say, hey, we are the second best team in the ACC.
Yeah.
And, they crushed North Carolina State 44-10, and it was over with. I was watching that game off and on. Second quarter, it was pretty much over with by halftime.
They really put it on.
They did, and that's the game they needed because they've been skirting by like a lot of ACC teams this year, barely winning games. Not very impressive at all. But they've solidified. Okay, we are the second best team, and they're gonna have a shot to win the ACC. I don't doubt it's going to happen, but at least there's somebody there that's challenging Clemson.
Right.
Which really there hasn't been anybody that's just like said, okay, we're here and you're going to have to deal with this because there's nobody else has done that. There's been a few wins here or there, but Wake Forest, hey man, you got hats off to them. I think they're 7-1 now?
Yeah, they've had one loss and it was to Louisville. Yeah, that was not too bad there.
The playoff rankings also have them at 19. 20, we got Memphis. After their big win against SMU, they're going to win the AAC now without some kind of where they just fold. The playoff rankings have them at 21, so they pretty much agree. But 54-48 against SMU. I know that they didn't win by much, but SMU's solid program, man. They know how to play some offense, and that score doesn't surprise me.
I honestly thought they kind of came out and punched SMU in the mouth.
They got up pretty good on them, didn't they?
Yeah, they did, and right out the gate too. They, I think they held SMU to a 3-and-out, and then they got the ball and ran it down the field, and then SMU had a whole they held them on the goal line 4 downs. So really, if they could have just gotten in the end zone there, that would have made the score even more lopsided. So, I really thought that they, kind of punched SMU in the mouth, honestly.
At 21, we got Indiana. And Drew and I are big on the Hoosiers.
Yeah.
We've been that way for the last 2 or 3 weeks. They're not in the CFP rankings. I'm sure they're right on the outside looking in, but I believe they're 6-2.
Yeah, I think they're 6-2.
Yeah, and they crushed Northwestern 34-3. And I like Indiana a lot. This team, it's like the best team they've had in, 35 or 40 years. And if they keep winning, it's going to be one of their best teams of all time. I mean, they hadn't been to a bowl game for a while. So it's very, very exciting at the University of Indiana right now because they actually have football to think about in November instead of let's all turn to basketball and see what's going on. So very exciting there for the Hoosiers. We got Cincinnati at
kind of
22.
escaped a close win there against East Carolina, correct?
Yes.
It
was a close one, 46-43. And
not really that impressive.
But they won.
But they were able to pull it out. So
23, we got Oklahoma State. Definitely, they should be in the top 25. They're just all of a sudden their defense is playing pretty good the last couple of weeks, and their offense hasn't slowed at all.
I got an interesting thing on that team, Oklahoma State. And this kind of
and Chuba Hubbard, man.
That's where I was going with this. This kind of blew my mind. There has never been, since Gary Patterson has been coaching, or any team he's coached, a Gary Patterson coached team has never given up 200 rushing yards in a game.
Pretty amazing.
Chuba Hubbard was the first running back to do that. And what he have, like 233 rushing yards? I mean, he played fantastic. He's
not going to win the Heisman because his team is not undefeated, which almost has to happen at this point.
If you're not a quarterback. If you're a quarterback, you can maybe have a loss or two, but
even a quarterback, 3 or 4 losses, it's real iffy, let's face it. But, I mean, you got to give the guy credit. I mean, what a season he's having. 24, we got Boise State. They just hang in there. Every time you think they're going to drop out of the top 25, they do something to stay in there, and they beat San Jose State 52-42, which I know doesn't sound all that impressive, but San Jose State's actually been a pretty solid program this year at times. So, they won, and they're 24. We actually got them lower than the playoff rankings. They got them at 22. And then to round it out for us, we got SMU. We still believe they belong there because they played at a tough place at Memphis. Memphis has a great coach, and they got a great team, and it's just a team full of playmakers, and that's their first loss. So I definitely think they belong at 25. And I believe the playoff rankings, they also got them. They got them at 25, so I agree with that. Well, guys, let us know what you think about the college football playoff rankings that came out. There were a few eyebrow-raising surprises, I would say. Tell us what you think about our top 25. We kind of like ours better, but anyway. We'll be talking to you, though. Like, subscribe, share, hit the notification bell. We'll have some more videos. Thanks.